Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the final OTD Ask Me Anything live stream of 2023. Can't believe the year is already over. That was very quick. So thanks everyone for coming, hanging out Thursday evening or whatever time it is, wherever you are. Thanks for coming and hanging out. So happy to answer any questions related to history, myself, whatever. At one point, I'll just do a quick look ahead. Yeah, that's what we're look ahead for 2024, and maybe just a little bit of a wrap up of 2023 and kind of the state of things here at OTD. So this is a heavy question already. Is, as a historian, this is from Susan, great supporter of the channel. As a historian, what is the most important lesson learned that you would pass on? That's a really good one. The most important one is, because I think about this a lot, because indirectly about, what is learned from history and what can be taken from it and kind of the value in that sense. So I guess I kind of think about it in that way. One of the most important to me is empathy and trying to understand why people do what they do in the past, in the future, trying to understand different circumstances. I mean, obviously there is some situations that I don't know if empathy is the right word. Understanding also feels kind of positive. I mean, I think we all know what I'm talking about when it comes to this stuff, the nasty people in history. I mean, you can try to understand their perspective. Doesn't mean you condone it or any of that. So, I mean, but for a lot of people, they're just people going about their lives trying to do what's best for them and those around them and all that kind of thing. So that's one of the most important lessons for me, broadly speaking, is empathy and trying to understand other people. Like, that's a big one for me. I mean, kind of doing the nitty gritty. One of the most important lessons I've learned is sources. Having evidence backing in some sort of way for things you may believe or claims you want to make, particularly about others. And I guess that kind of goes to the empathy point, trying to understand, again, in a solid way, why these things happen the way they do and why people act the way they do and do the things they do. So that's a big one for me, is sourcing and trying to understand, and whatever that may be. I mean, there's all kinds of versions of that, and that's one of them for sure. I mean, I talked about that all the time. I'm sure a lot of you already know that, but more recently, again, in the little AI video I pulled out from the live stream I did the other day on that, kind of the importance of sources when it comes to those new changes and everything going on in that world, and all that applies. So, like, that's been a big one for me, right, in understanding the importance of primary sources and access to them and all of that stuff. I mean, as an undergrad, you don't really get a sense of the archives and what goes into that whole process and everything. I wasn't really introduced to those until grad school, particularly at the university where I did that, because I did my master's and undergrad at the same place. So I didn't really get a sense of even their operation, which is quote unquote small, but everything that goes into that, and it's a lot. And then I ended up working there for a short period, so even a better understanding of literally the processes that go into these places. It's amazing what they're able to do with increasingly shrinking budgets. So that's a big one for me, is preservation of sources, use of sources, importance of sources. Right? You can't just say things and expect people to believe you, especially in this online world of ours. I see it all the time. It happens a lot. People just say things and I go, well, you got to prove that. You can't just say that. And some people you never hear from again, or some people just say, well, too bad, you have to believe me. And I go, well, I don't. But so that's neither here nor there. But that just gets me thinking in the world that I operate in, and that helps there. But yeah, I mean, the internet helps in that regard. Not as much as one would like, obviously. You always like it to be better. It's hard, right, to get access to everything and keep access. I mean, it's some places have given stuff digitally and then had to take them away because of budget cuts and other priorities and things like that. So just because it was digitized on the internet doesn't mean it forever will be accessible. So that's problematic. So, yeah, I am no, I am not a politician. No, I am not. I think that's pretty fairly well known by you guys by this point. If people get upset, then so be it. I don't really care. Muggins, yes, yes and no. He's getting better being on his own, which is helpful. Before, when we first got on, you couldn't leave him alone at all, or he'd lose his mind. Now he's getting much better with it. Good to have around. And he's so funny and cute. He's downstairs right now. I don't want to bring him up because that'll unsettle him. But he had a big day today, a lot of running around. But he's getting bigger now. I really should show more photos and videos of him. But he's gotten so much bigger than he was, particularly the last time he was on a stream. I think that was in the summer. So he's much bigger now. He's not going to get much bigger than he is. He's about 20 pounds. So he should be about 25-ish at max. So he's not a big dog, but he's very cute. He just had a haircut. I think I have some photos I can post later on. I don't have them currently. I don't think I might in a bit, but I can check on that. But yeah, Smuggins is good. He had a bit of a medical scare the other day. I didn't know this. I mean, it makes sense, but I mean, in Canada, those of you know, is marijuana is legal here, right? You can get it literally on almost every corner now. Stores all over the place. It's very bad for dogs. And as those of you who've had a puppy know, they go everywhere and eat everything they see. So we think at some point he ingested somewhere in our little condo complex that we live in. And he was having a bad night last week now. I can't remember. Last week, I think it was last week. So yeah, that was really bad and really scary because it can cause some, seems like a neurological tic. So we ran him into the vet late at night and had to get that taken care of. So thank goodness we have pet insurance, because without it, his bills already would be high. So he's doing good now. No, he's good to go. Yeah, so any other questions, fire away. If there's anything yet, I can talk about the year ahead. So for 2024. So obviously the Normandy project has been a big focus already. Already been spending a ton of time on that already to begin with reading and finding good primary sources, particularly testimony from those who fought there in all the different areas. And it's been really good. Some of the sources I found, some of them are really enlightening. Some are what you would expect, but I think some of them are going to make for really good elements of the filming of what I'm going to be doing when I go there, which I am going now. That's confirmed. Going in April. Just have to book a car now because there's no real good no options for public transit for what I want to do, because I've already been trying to plot out and look at some locations that are not easy to get to. Unless you have, or you're really into biking, or you have a car, which I am not that into biking. So plus it's just a timing thing, right? I want to get as much done in the short amount of time I have. So it's going to take some driving. So put out a list for patrons and YouTube channel members of the topics, events and things like that I'm planning to do at this moment. So if you haven't seen those and you are one of them, go check that out. And you can go see that. It's quite an extensive list. I know it's going to be a lot. Some stuff might have to change or be combined, and we'll see how it goes. But a lot of them I think are important to cover and need to be done well. So it's going to take a lot of work. So that's going to take up a ton of time moving into next year. Because I have to start working already. I've already started some of the videos, particularly about the Royal Canadian Navy. That's the first one I want to do because I want to get into that. So, good to hear you're having a party, Lorelei. Thanks for stopping in and saying hi. So the list is accessible there. I'm not going to make that public because I want to keep that as a benefit to patrons and members for seeing that. And also, haven't added to the annotated bibliography. just because I've been busy. Things have happened. Again, Muggins, yeah, it's scary. They are scary. With Muggins, we lost a family member, I don't know, now 2 weeks ago now. So it's just been a bit trying to keep focused and do the other work I have to do and keep everything up with that. But it shouldn't be getting better now, particularly in the new year. But I definitely think I need a break. I think I'm starting to hit the wall. But yeah, so it's obviously looking forward to that. Looking to do some live streams, hopefully early in January. We'll see. I got to get in contact with some people. I got to do some reading. And I'm hoping to do back into that. I know it's been a while. It's just been difficult to schedule them for myself. Not even trying to get people. It's just been trying to find the time for myself with trying to balance everything I'm doing and that. And people being, all over the place. It makes things more difficult to schedule. So I want to get back into that. I'm thinking of doing some Normandy live streams just to kind of like a taster kind of January, maybe January, February, maybe February now, but cover it, get some excitement building for that as we are moving towards that anniversary. So that's a big one. Obviously, that's going to take up the most part of the early 2024. I don't really plan on releasing. Oh, hey, thanks for everyone for coming out. I guess I didn't say hi to everybody. There's a lot of you guys now. So just hello, everyone, for coming and hanging out. Yeah, so I don't really have plans for any other videos until those. So bear with me. There might be some little ones here or there if I have like an idea or come up with something too good not to. But the ones that have to do with the Navy and the RCAF will come out when they are ready to go. Again, I'm not sure when that will be, but they will be released well in advance of the anniversary because I want to give that background. And give them their standalone look because I think it's important. Those services don't get covered a lot, and particularly Canada's story. For those of you aware of the events that happen, things like you get the Navy experience from just D-Day, which is not the case, right? They're doing a lot more work well before that, and then after the landings as well. There's a lot going on. In terms of that, and then you have the RCAF is involved, as ongoing right from the beginning, well before the landings. It's really good to cover those. I mean, sometimes they get a bit of a bad rap, the RCAF in Normandy, particularly as the Canadians are concerned with things like the friendly fire that takes place during Operation Total Eyes Intractable. I want to cover more than that and cover the bases, right? Because there's a lot more going on. And yeah, things like the mortar. I can never say that word in combination. The MTBs. Yeah, see, I can't do it. I don't know why. I can say motor, no problem on its own. But when I try to say motor torpedo boat, I can't do it. It's weird. Anyway. Yeah, so those are involved. I mean, they move some destroyers fairly early off of convoy duty to the channel to help kind of lock that down and destroy any German surface vessels they can. That happens pretty early on, and it's some pretty harrowing stuff. I mean, what they go through, and that's well before the landings. I think they transfer in February, so that's well early, right, of what's going on, right? We tend to think of the Navy as, particularly the Royal Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy, as doing the landing craft and the destroyers and the ships offshore and supporting the landings. But there's a lot more to it than that, right? Normandy's not just June 6th onward. So that's something I want to bring across with those videos. They'll probably be longer just because I want to cover those services and give them their due before, it kind of comes an Army show. I mean, and I think that's for good reason, right? Well, what's going on with the campaign and Canada's campaign specifically, right? It's a large Army contribution, and not to deny them. So that's an important one. So that's going to be done. So yeah, and Merchant Marine as well. That will be lumped in with, I'm going to do call like the Navy, but that'll be part of it. Because again, I found some testimony from that as well. So from a great website where you got to know what you're looking for to get these things, but there's tons of them, and there's some really cool ones. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Another one I want to do is try to understand. Well, I mean, I know why, but understand it in a way that's accessible for why Canada's Normandy. That's the three I put on the list. That's pretty much the only insight you'll get here. But of the I think I call them backgrounder videos. So that'll be one, right? Why is Canada even involved in Normandy at all? Like, what's going on here? I mean, it's not. Sorry, I just saw a comment. I don't want to forget. I'll get to that in a second. But I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, Canada, Normandy, right? It's not predestined that Canada is going to be involved in the Normandy campaign. It's not how it necessarily would have gone. That those who know, and I had Marc Milner on, and he talks about this in his book, how this goes, and it's quite a process of Canada's changing role in Normandy. It's supposed to be the initial spearhead with the 1st Canadian Army. As we know, that's not what happens. But they were supposed to be, the spearhead, and they weren't. And look at why that changes and things like that. I want to get into that and explain that in an accessible way, because it's quite a fascinating story of how Canada's role and perception of Canada changes because of leadership and developments in the war. And Canada's role is not quite as set in stone as some people think it is. And of course, I want to cover that because a lot of people just don't know about the Canadian involvement in Normandy, period. Something that just fell over behind me. So they don't really get involved in that. Sorry, it's not. Some people just don't know. They don't think they're involved, or it's minimal, and it's just not the case, as we know. Coast Guard. So that's the U.S. Coast Guard. So maybe I can speak about that in a second, because Pat makes an excellent point. Here is political interference and egos obviously plays a role in what Canada does and doesn't do in Normandy. That's a big part of it. And I mean, it's that political background or stuff that some people don't like, but I think it's just fascinating because people don't think of Canadian history that way. There's literal political backstabbing and generals turning on each other and all this intrigue and stuff. It's crazy what's going on there. But yeah, hopefully I can do that well. So Coast Guard, right? So it's the U.S. Coast Guard that's involved. Yes, not denying that. I've got a quick video I want to make. I have the things literally up here in my browser. Just haven't had the time. It's an amazing photo, and there's a great story behind it. So I want to cover that. That's just the Canadian Coast Guard's not involved. I don't think it existed yet. Could be wrong. I'm probably wrong, but not as old. But yeah, maybe this can be. I could turn this into a question, right? There's lots of other things to cover in Normandy, right? I mean, this channel started and remains to be primarily Canadian military history, and I'm calling it the Canada Normandy Project. Doesn't mean I won't cover other things. I haven't had a chance to sit and make a plan yet, even a rough plan, because I only have 7 days, and I only have a short amount of time. So I'm going to cover the Canadian ones properly. And I mean, I've been to the majority of the places I'm going to, so that should help. I mean, some of it's changed, some of it hasn't. So that should help me move through and do what I need to do. So I might be covering some more American and British ones. There's one American story I definitely want to cover. I already covered it, but I want to go to that ground because I haven't been to that particular area where this happens. There's a video, and I can link it after, about a major who's a liaison between, I think he's a liaison with the 1st. Sorry, he's with the 29th, but he's from the 1st, and lands in Omaha. And he wrote these notes the night of D-Day on an envelope. It's a crazy story. That for sure is the one I will do. So I don't want to promise anything outside of that. But that one I want to do because I want to go to that ground, because I spent a lot of time on that video. And I had that looking at that source for months before I made that video. So I want to cover that and go to that ground and cover this one because I did a lot of research on that. I learned about the men that were fighting there and those who were killed and all of this stuff that goes on in Omaha. It's like the stereotypical view of what went on at that beach. And I want to cover that in depth because Omaha has been done to death, but I've never seen that story other than just a few social media posts. So I want to cover that one on here. I mean, I already have, but going to the ground, I mean, to me, it's a bit of paying homage to those who fought there, but also getting that in there, and who knows when I'll get to go back. So I definitely want to cover that, but I'm not going to say for sure what else I'm going to do. I don't know as of time wise, and those of you who've been to Normandy know it's not the easiest to get around because the roads are a little crazy. So I don't want to say for sure, but I will cover as much as I can with the amount of time I have. Yeah, I'm sure Monty didn't want the Canadians in the vanguard. Probably not. Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. Because it doesn't. I don't know if Monty has a veto over that. Because the whole thing with First Canadian Army is bigger than, I mean, technically Canadians are in the vanguard, right? They're Canadian Division lands, just with the rest of them. But yeah, it was supposed to be First Canadian Army, so there's more to it than that, about how things change and when Eisenhower comes in, and Monty does have a role to play. A lot of that changed, so yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, and I want to get into that. That's what I mean. There's just so much intricacies off the top of my head. I can't remember the sequence of events, because Marc Milner covers it and stopping the Panzers expertly, obviously, because he knows what he's doing. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it wasn't really up to him at that point. It wasn't up to Mackenzie King, but depends who you ask, right? Some he didn't care. If you like, depends on who you ask, what historian and how they go about this and how they view King. Some say he probably just didn't care at all. Like the war seemed like a nuisance to his power, which I kind of agree with. I mean, he's the one who pushes for the RCAF to be a major contribution, thinking it'll be lower casualties, and yet the casualty rates are massive in comparison to the Army casualty rates, and your numbers are high, so it doesn't really work out. So, it's pretty crazy how that goes. But yeah, he doesn't really even mention it much in his diary, where he talks about everything else. So I think that's a good insight about how he's thinking about it. But yeah, he's an interesting guy. I've talked about him a bunch. Took Muggins to his estate. I'm going to try and recreate some photos in the summer with his dogs, because of those who know him, with Mackenzie King, who's obsessed with his dogs. So yeah, he's a fascinating character. He doesn't really play into Normandy too much, because it's kind of out of the Canadian politicians' hands at that point. But yeah, I mean, he wanted to keep casualties down because he didn't want conscription. So yeah. Any recommendations for World War II Canadian military history books? Oh, you've come to the right place. I put them back on the shelf. I've just been referencing so many of them. Sorry, I have books all over the place. Tim Cook's is excellent, as you say. Where are they? So I've got this one here. If you're interested in Normandy, sorry, the light. Someone said I didn't show the books good enough, so I'm just going to keep this here for longer than normal. This is a good one. This covers, as it says, Canadians in Normandy. This is the go-to if someone's like, I want an overview of what the Canadian does. The Canadians do in Normandy. It's this. This is the go-to. I mean, it's pretty expensive if you want your own copy nowadays, but you can just get it at the library. Stopping the Panzers around here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. This is talking about. Sorry, I don't have the dust jacket on it. Dust jackets actually drive me crazy. Yeah, so this is stopping the Panzers. So he talks about Marc Milner talks about how Canada becomes involved, what its role is in Normandy at the initial landings and the days after, right? Because some people talk about how we don't talk about past June 6th much. That's what he does. He talks about how 3rd Canadian Division's role is to stop the Panzers, right? The area around Juno Beach is, and this is something I'm going to talk about a lot, is perfect tank country, and they know the Germans are going to hit there because it's the only place they can hit. They can't steam against the bocage. They know roughly where the armored divisions are. They know what the plan's roughly going to be because they know German doctrine. So they know what they got to do, and the Canadians do it, and then some. So that's a go-to. I talk about Tim Cook's is the go-to for an overview. Best way to do it. I'm just trying to see because my Canadian shelf is literally behind me. I can't go wrong with Mark Zilke either if you're interested in anything specific. Like you can see behind me, Ortona. He does obviously the Normandy campaign. And he's been on the channel. He's done shells, all of it. He's done pretty much all of it at this. I think he's done them all now. I don't think there's any missing. Yeah, his are good because he does a really good job of getting new veterans and interview veterans and all of that. Those are the go-to. And if you want a bit older but free, is the official history. If the Canadian Army is available online, all of it. So you can find that. It's dated, and I'll talk about Victory Campaign, which covers Normandy probably, hopefully sometime early in the new year, as part of the series of live streams that I do talking about books and stuff. We inevitably have to cover Stacy, so I will talk about it there. But yeah, oh yeah, you just said about the official histories of the navies. Yeah, so you can check out the Army. Air Force is not as accessible because it's newer, so you got to buy it because it was done in the 90s and early 2000s. But yeah, so those are the ones I recommend off the top of my head for those, because those are just what's in my brain at the moment. But yeah, there's lots of good stuff out there. So are you going to be there for D-Day? No, I will be back in Canada by then. It'll be a madhouse for the 80th. I was there on the 73rd anniversary, something like that. Non-special number. And it was crazy then. So I can only imagine what's like for the 80th. It's going to be madhouse. And I'd rather just not. I'd rather avoid it. Just because prices would be ridiculous. I've already seen some stuff of what people have paid and are going to be paying and all that stuff. So yeah, so it's not something I plan on doing. Yes, Monty was in charge of Allied Land Forces. Yes. But yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, Scott, but it's just, yeah, the plan had changed. Technically because of Monty. Again, we'll get into that in the video, but again, there's so many moving parts here and it's personality based too. It's not necessarily Canadians, so to speak. I mean, I talked about that in the live stream about John English's book and talking about Monty in more depth. Necessarily Monty claimed he liked Canadian soldiers and they were good. He didn't like their leadership. So lots of moving pieces there. Different tangent. Yeah, I'm going to change. Boer War, 1899. The first time Canadian troops served as Imperial troops? Technically, yes. Some Canadians served in Sudan with the whole, what's his name? With Kitchener's army, but what's the guy? Gordon? Guy got killed at Khartoum. Is it Gordon? Anyway, so that whole expedition of Kitchener, they served the rafts basically because they worked in Canada, moving lumber down the difficult rivers there at the time. So technically that's the first one, but they're on a combat role. This is the first combat role for Canadians and in a large number. I mean, obviously Canadians had served in the British military, but this is Canadian badged troops serving overseas and in the Imperial forces. There had been a Canadian regiment in the British Army. I don't really think that counts, and they don't last a long time, and there's a whole other political thing behind that, as this always goes. Yeah, that's it. Voyageurs, that's the word I was looking for. That's got my back. Yeah, so this is the first combat role with cavalry, infantry, and artillery. There's Victoria Cross is one, and all that shebang, and Canadians leading Canadians, and all that stuff. But yeah, it's a fascinating conflict. Again, with just a lack of time. I just haven't covered the Boer War as much as I'd like, or South Africa more. It's had such a major impact on Canada, and still does, I would argue, and we just don't acknowledge it in that sense. I've always thought the best way to do it, and I've done a little bit, I've shown them the places I've been, but there's South African war memorials all over the place, and they just seem to get lost, right? There's a massive one in Toronto that's at a super busy intersection downtown that most people just ignore, but it's been there for a long time and made by Walter Allward who did Vimy. And there's one in Montreal in Dorchester Square that's also pretty big, and it takes up a huge chunk of space. I grew up in London, Ontario. It's got one. It's connected to the RCR. I mean, the strains of that war ran through Canada and still do, I would argue, but it's just not looked at in that way. And I just haven't had the time to do it. But yeah, yes, I can do, sorry, moving on without bringing it up. Amazon affiliate links, yes, I do have them. I just don't have them off the top of my head. But I can post them after if that works for you in the description, if that's okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Always happy to recommend books. So even if you want to reach out to me personally, you can do so at any time. I'm happy to help. Yeah, pretty much. That's 100% correct. Um, yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, going for a D-Day anniversary was definitely worth it. Um, that was definitely worth going for and seeing and visiting my relative's grave who was killed on June 6th as part of the Chaudière and going to Benny and all the ceremonies that have done that day. I'm definitely glad I've done that. I just think the 80th is going to be a madhouse and just utterly bonkers. And I mean, the politicians will be enforced, so access will be limited and all that. I heard some wild stories. I think it was the 50th back in the 90s about veterans being cut off from towns and things because of politicians and people just sneaking them in because they're the ones who did all this instead of helping the politicians do the ribbon cutting and whatever. Marc Milner's got some amazing stories of this stuff. Yeah, so it was Gordon. Yeah, my memory doesn't fail me isn't that much. I mean, yes. According to the Canadian government, obviously not foreign in there. Yeah, it's not foreign to the Canadian government. That's the whole thing, right? Is controlling that, particularly 1870. I mean, we've had Dave Gribstad on to talk about that kind of thing and what went on there and all of that. And it was a fascinating live stream. If you haven't seen it, you should. About all that difference and all the thing that goes on. You get the real detailed picture of what happened there. And it's far more complicated than it already seems. But yeah, I mean, obviously to the Métis people, it's a foreign government imposing on them, but to the Canadian government, not so much. Yeah, I just want to stay on this for a second here there's lots. Ladysmith, Inkerman, another city I lived in for quite a while, St. Thomas, Ontario, has tons of roads named after. Sorry, I'm thinking of Inkerman is. Sorry, we're mixing two wars here. Inkerman is Crimean War, but Ladysmith and the like. Yeah, you see that too. There's street names and places and all of that as well. But again, that's Crimea. That's two I haven't done much on and really find fascinating. But yeah, no, you're right. I'm sure there's other Boer War related names all over the place. I know there is. But yeah, Inkerman is the Crimean War. That said, St. Thomas, Ontario has 4 or 5 roads named after Crimean War battles that I'm pretty sure the people who live in them have next to no idea where these come from. There's Matt. Oh, Victoria Street. Yeah, where one of the bridges is over the canal. Yeah, Math King. Yeah, there's tons of them. I'm sure you can find lots. We love naming our cities after things like that. So Scott always throws me curveballs, as he likes to do with all his knowledge. So this is one I don't know, and I told Scott I don't know much about, and I just didn't have time. I've been working, trying to get some other stuff done before leaving for the holidays. But this one, if you don't know about it, it's fascinating. I think this has come up at some other point or another. Is Canadians that fought with the Continental Army in the American Revolution War of Independence. To me, that's fascinating. They were a small unit. I mean, they were raised by the Continental Congress. That's pretty much all I know. And they fight through the entire war, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure the politics going into that one, what's considered a Canadian at the time, and what the makeup of the unit actually was. Was it French Canadians? Was it English Canadians or other groups? I don't know. That would be a really interesting one to learn about. And if I could get an expert on that one to come on, that would be awesome. Because that's what the live streams can do, can cover the ones I don't know and get us that knowledge. I think that's a fascinating one. I mean, same kind of kick with the American Civil War stuff that I did a while back. All these seemingly small Canadian connections, which some of them have outsized impacts, particularly in the U.S. Civil War. Doing that research was fascinating. It's wild. Like I say this for the Second World War, but it applies in so many other places. As Canada gets everywhere, Canadians are everywhere. We find our way into all kinds of stuff in ways you don't expect. So, unfortunately, I don't know too much about it, but that's something I'd love to learn more because I think Scott, you saw a book. Yeah, it was in Mount Vernon. I think you told me somewhere somewhere connected to the revolution and one of the higher ups at the time. I think it was Mount Vernon. But yeah, it's another fascinating one. I'd love to find someone who knows a ton about that stuff. Yeah, Alma. Yeah, there's another one. There's Alma Street in St. Thomas. Yeah, you are. You're always throwing me curveballs and things I don't know about, and making me go down rabbit holes and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's you always keep me on my toes, Scott, which I appreciate, and make me learn new stuff, because it's another bonus of this whole OTD shebang, is I'm always learning new stuff that I never thought I would be, and love to keep that going. Military History Symposium channel might know. Yeah, maybe they have. Yeah, I've been on there, so I know them. We've been on here. Yeah, it was Mount Vernon. Memory doesn't fail me completely at times like this. Maybe I can reach out to them. Maybe they know somebody, or know people who are American Revolution scholars. Yeah, I know a few, so maybe I can reach out to them as well. But yeah, yeah, it's absolutely wild, of these stories and things like that. Oh God. Sorry, I just saw Pat's recent comments. Yes, technically one of the first. Yeah, Alexander Dunn. He takes part in the charge of the Light Brigade at Balaclava, and yeah, he's one of the first, right? Because the first VCs are the Crimean War, right? Because that's where it comes from. So technically, yes, he's one of the first. There's a whole. It's like an Ottawa thing, but I know other cities do it too. I've never seen it to the extent that Ottawa does it, but like, BCs have parks all over this city. Like, they're everywhere, and they're all of them. A lot of good chunk of them are located in Canada. If anyone knows Canada, good chunk of them. Second World War, First World War. Dunn has a park. I think there's some South African ones there as well. Maybe I could be mistaken, but anyway, there's a whole whack of them. And I always find that so interesting, of how cities do this, and which ones they pick and don't pick, and it's fascinating. But yeah, there's a Canadian, was one of the first VCs. Yeah, and Pat is an Ottawa local as well. So yeah, I'm not sure which part of Canada, but they're easy to find. Yeah, I'm not sure which part they're in, but Canada's not that big, so. Oh, geez. I know nothing of this. I'm not touching that. What do you talk about this, right? Go watch it on World War II TV. just, yeah, he did. He covered this. So, yeah, I'm not touching that one. Sean. Yeah. I mean, this was a while back, but yeah. There's some. I mean, there's been a whole bunch of them, particularly recently. There's some new areas, particularly in the east, going up. That was old government land connected to Rockcliffe, the old RCAF station. They're doing aviation like crazy, and I'm learning that because of the work I do with the RCAF Foundation. So they're all all Air Force. Oh God, I'm gonna get fired. All Air Force and like planes and stuff. It's really cool, and aviators. And I mean, that was there for the groundbreaking for the William Barker Park, which is supposed to be opening next year. So that'll be cool. Once that's done, it's going to look really good. So yes, it's not just politicians anymore, even though we still do that. Even though I haven't seen as many recently. But again, I don't live in a new part of town. So yeah. Congress's own. Yeah, you sent me the picture so I can use that. Hopefully, again, I don't know when the book was written, right? So like, that's what I mean. Like, sometimes I'll find like a really cool subject that I'm like really interested in. And then the book was written in like the 90s, and the person is off the radar. So I hope that's not the case. Maybe I can speak to this Holly Mayer. They're out there. I don't know. We'll find out. But I'm sure there are other people as well. Hopefully I can do more. Oh God. What? Why? What? Please tell us more. Scott, yeah, you make an excellent point here. I should delve more into the Cold War. Not my area of expertise, shockingly. I know. Maybe David can come on the channel again, or I could do something with him. He's from Ottawa and obviously the internet, but he lives in Toronto. So I'm sure we could come together again at some other point. But yeah, there's lots of Cold War stories. I find all kinds of crazy ones, and other research I've done. And Yeah, like there's really, really cool ones to cover. It's just not the ones I know the best, right? So it takes a little more work, and I've done a little bit of Cold War stuff. I mean, I'd love to go back. I haven't been to the Defense Bunker since I did that video back in 2021. I mean, it's not my best video, and I didn't do it the way I should have done it, but I'm still early in the channel and still learning. I'd love to cover it again because it's such a fascinating story um, with the Deep Bunker and what they thought this thing could do. And now we realize that was just unrealistic. And some points of the bunker, like it's supposed to survive nuclear war, right? Just outside the city in Ottawa here. It's now technically it is in Ottawa because it's now in Copp, which is now part of Ottawa, blah, blah, blah. Copp is known for the Deep Bunker and the Copp Creamery, which is an ice cream place. So you can make a day of it. I've done it. I go to Copp all the time because it's just west of the city. The main chunk of Canada there. It's actually really nice little area. But yeah, it's not far from here. It could go back. Could reach out to them again. Maybe something I can think about in the future. But yeah, it's fascinating. And the things they thought this thing could survive, and then you realize there was just cinder blocks were the only thing protecting this thing at certain points. And who got to go in? Yeah, as Pat says here, who got to go in and who didn't. I mean, one of the policies, again, was for those who lived in the area, they'd have to get dropped off by family members, and the family members weren't allowed in. And we're talking about full-out nuclear war here. So, like, that's just absolutely wild, right? Like, okay, see you later, honey. When you go die now, I'm going to go sit in this bunker that's probably not going to protect me anyway, even though I don't know that. They had decontamination showers and, like, a room for cabinet to meet and an apartment for the prime minister, and which now is apparently having leaking issues, which is interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a really cool place to visit and kind of gets you into the mindset of the Cold War and the thinking behind all the decisions that were made. And people love the vault that was supposed to take all the gold and everything, even though that only was a short chunk of period, and obviously that never happened. It's just a popular area, and they do a great job of showing this and doing some other programming. And I really shouldn't get back in touch with them. So yeah, this is maybe the impetus I needed to get moving. 2021, perfect. Yeah, I will reach out to them then if I can't find the author's information. I should probably write this down somewhere. You guys always making me do more work. Yeah, I'm just gonna write this down. 1 second. Yeah, so that's cool. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. So good to know it's from a press that's I've heard done some good things, and not that long ago. That's awesome. Well, here we go. Getting off topic a little. Do you have any opinions that you would like to share about popular YouTube history channels? Which ones you follow? Which popular ones drive you nuts? Okay, so this isn't what you're asking, but I want to do this because I want to talk about this anyway. It's not necessarily the channels themselves that I have an issue with sometimes. It's the people who watch them. This is going to sound really bad, especially as a very small channel. But it's something I notice, and it's something that's been going on ever since I've been interested in history, really, particularly as a Canadian. I see it all the time when a big one, covers a Canadian topic, not an issue with that. Most of them are done pretty well, like the big ones, like World War II. It's called World War II with what's their names? Indian Idell and Spartacus something. The guy with the mustache and the pipe. Like they'll cover a Canadian topic and they'll do an extremely well done video, and because I know they do the research and they're TV guys, so they're really good at presenting this stuff. But then you'll see like someone commenting down below being like, "Yay, Canadian topic covered, thank you, we never get talked about." Like that drives me crazy as a Canadian history channel, or largely focused on Canadian military history channel, because these people are not going looking for it. Right. That's what bothers me the most, is they wait and sit around for these big creators that have become big for all kinds of reasons. And a lot of it is earned. Some of it, I would argue, is not earned. Certain channels. I don't want to say negative about things right now because that might get me in trouble. Maybe I'll get to it. Maybe I'll some of them you guys know, some of them I don't like, and I don't need to say which ones those are. But there's a lot of them that I don't like. One in particular I do not like, and you know which one that is. Got brought up on the last live stream. I think I can't remember who brought it up. Anyway, might have been you, Sean. I don't remember. Sorry. So that bugs me, right? Because the people claim they want these stories to be told, but they don't go looking for them. They wait for them to come to them, and that's what bothers me. So that's more about like kind of YouTube culture and things like that. Is it's Canadian stories don't get told, and we don't cover our own stories. And I'm like, well, we do now, and we're trying to do better. It's just a lot of Canadians out there aren't supporting them. They wait for a Brit or an American or a European channel to cover them. And while that's all well and good, and again, not insulting anyone, because I know lots of non-Canadians who've done amazing work, had them on the channel, respect them gratefully. And this isn't directed at anyone in particular, but sometimes just the little details are told wrong. Things aren't done quite right. Names will be mispronounced. I mean, if you do that with other countries, Britain, if you pronounce your weird spelling names wrong, you guys lose your minds. But if someone says, Regina is Regina, nobody cares. But Canadians are like, hey, that's not how it's done, right? Or, it feels like it's not getting into that depth, or nobody asked anybody who's Canadian. So, like, I see that, but there's lots of channels doing really, really good. Like, ones I really like are kind of draw a blank on it. Obviously, World War II TV. Shout out Woody, as I do often. For those, I don't know how you guys don't know about him yet, because I'm pretty sure you all do. Watching him live, especially, and kind of talked about what happened with him in the last live stream about AI, which was stupid. That was dumb and making me angry, because it's just dumb. Makes no sense. Battlefield Guide, that's the one that comes to me. They do really good work. Dan Hill and his team, watch their stuff a lot. They do really good shorts, which I really like. They've really got a good way of getting a lot of information in a punchy format. But their long form stuff is fantastic, and they go to these places and they do the research, and it's a wide breadth of stuff with First World War, Second World War. They might be doing some more stuff in the future. I really respect them and the work they do. That's one I really, really like. What's another one that I don't watch too much anymore, just because it's just busy. I try to watch stuff at like lunch. I like doing that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other ones that I like. I need memory jogging, or I can come back to this one. But I don't really want to say like the popular ones that drive me nuts. I mean, we all know lots of channels out there that are not good history and yet get tons and hundreds of thousands of views and things like that, because then I'll just be said I'm complaining or I'm jealous. And even though the history is garbage, and they keep getting support and money poured into them from people, and it's just, that's what drives me crazy, is people want good history, but they pour their money into terrible history, and it just, the cycle keeps going and going and going, and it feeds into itself. So maybe that's not what you're looking for, but that's what I'm willing to do at the moment. I probably need a few beers to really, and not on the internet, to tell the truth. Yes, I know, Scott, you keep trying to get me to tell that story. It's not my area, and I don't know how to cover it in detail yet. I maybe in the future. I am still thinking about how to do that one, and it is a good story, and you've sent me the resources. I know you have. It's just RCN operations in the 60s is not something I'm most comfortable covering. So it would take some time. But yeah, I mean, obviously that one is still in the back of my mind, particularly with the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Such a fascinating time period for Canada as well, and Canada's role. Yeah, and going back to the Cold War there, you're right, Nora. I need to get him back, maybe in the new year. As I know he has a ton of going to, full-time job, and he's back to school, even though I told him not to go. But yeah. And yes, going back to our carp people, Cheshire Cat, which is technically in carp, even though it's closer to Canada. For those of you not here, it doesn't really matter, and it's a great place. Love Cheshire Cat. Hello, Ghost Wheel. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, yeah, that's the one. You can tell stories anytime you want, and yeah, oh yeah, and of course, well, I think I just needs to keep moving on me here. Where is it? Sorry, I'm going back here. Sean, yeah, others watching, if you have suggestions or ones you like, Yeah, let me know. I'm always wanting to check stuff out. I've tried to been watching more broadly now just to get some ideas and see how people do stuff. So I'm always open to watching some stuff. Yeah, Alexander Clark, that's another one. I was watching his stuff. Man, they're detailed. He's very detailed with the stuff he does, and he does it so often. It's impressive that he's able to do that. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. Tell stories as much as you want, and one point we'll get you to talk on. Get on the channel, Norma. You're going to have to now with Burt Kennedy. We'll make you do it. Yeah, you're right, Pat. They just want the same old, same old. They claim they want these things and they don't, and then they complain about stuff, and they just want the same old to confirm biases, or they don't want to, learn new things or in a new way. And it's that's what frustrates me. I guess the way to answer for Sean there is the channels that take advantage of that, and they make money, and they make a good chunk of money, while so many of others of us are struggling to keep going and trying to do things properly. Sometimes it does feel like a losing battle to keep going. Yeah, I know in the Patreon comments. Okay, because I didn't really explain in the comment. I should have to you guys when we were talking about this. But yeah, Carpet in the video I did for that reaction to the was it Canadian perspective? Canadian perspective D-Day bird's eye view or something from the Armchair Historian. I mean, it was a fairly good video. The visuals are pretty cool, and I know that takes a lot of work to get that animation in and everything. Some little things like Carpet was mispronounced multiple times, and it's not a Canadian location, even though there is a Carpet at least now. I don't know how old it is, but I think it's fairly old, right? A lot of the areas out there are actually Norman names, because that's a good chunk of the people came from Normandy. Because I've been accused of not knowing what I'm talking about because I don't pronounce foreign names properly, particularly German words and names. So I don't want to be that guy who's being like, you said that name wrong, you know nothing. It's just annoying, but I don't try to focus on that. But yeah, I get what you're saying. It's not that hard to learn. To me, German is just so difficult, and people get so weird about it. So I just don't even try, because they're still going to be mad at me anyway. So what's the point? Yeah, I mean, I he just goes so in depth, just like Alexander Clark. It's over my head. It's nothing to do with them. It's me. Just not in the Navy in that way, right? I'm just like, technical stuff isn't me, and they got that nailed down, and yeah, he covers some fascinating stuff from all time periods. That's really cool that he's able to do that and get people on to talk about it and have that great following. It's amazing to see, and yeah, it's good stuff. And from other people who know their stuff, tell me it's good stuff, so that is good, if you know what I mean. But yeah, it's just so much goes over my head with all these technical details and stuff. And I'm just like, ugh, I can't do it. I can't do it. Operations room. Yes, that's another one. See, this is where we go. I need stuff to jog my memory. Yes, lots of good stuff. Lots of breadth of coverage as well. I think there was some on Desert Storm. That was kind of cool. Stuff you don't typically see presented in that way. Again, yeah, I just don't watch as much as I like, but Operations Room for sure is definitely one I really like, and how it's done, in the style it's done, and the way it's engaging. It's fantastic. I don't watch that channel. I've heard some not so good things, so I just never really comes across it, and that, as the algorithm, works. If it doesn't really work into it, it doesn't really work into it. Let's do it. Burt Kennedy. Well, let's do it. Fascinating story. We've covered it a little bit with Sicily, but there's more to it there, and I won't say any more. Hoff. What do you mean, just in general? Yes, Hoffmeister. Yes, the answer is yes. If you want me to talk about him, I could. Fascinating guy. Yeah, we could do that too. That'd be really cool, covering the 435 Squadron in Burma, and the supply runs and all of that. It's definitely understudied area of the RCAF. Its operations in Southeast Asia. Definitely taking you up on that. How about shows reviewing films with Canadian military content? It's just not enough, unfortunately. I don't want to talk about Passchendaele again. It's terrible. It would just me saying, well, it's just me complaining and how it's bad, and people go, it's a movie, blah blah blah. I can already see the comments for all this work I put in, and just get the same old comments over and over again. Hyena Road, I've also heard is terrible. I avoided it because Passchendaele was so bad. So why would I watch Hyena Road? Again, I don't know too many. Right? There's some from the war. It could actually be an interesting one to do. Captain of the Clouds would be cool to look at. If I get time to do that at some point next year, I could definitely look at that one. James Cagney and the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, and it's got Billy Bishop in it, and it's an interesting little one. And then you got the Navy ones as well. That could be really cool to look at. So yeah, I think that's probably a better way to go about it, is looking at those films from the Second World War era and just after. Would probably be the better way of going about that. And now convincing myself to do this. So there you go. Scott always giving me more work to do. Oh yeah, get them addicted young. Do it young. Yeah, I mean, this is a good point, Ghost Wheel, here is people are accustomed to infotainment, and they prefer the engagements. They don't necessarily want to learn. They just want to hear about stories they know over and over and over again, presented in different ways. And maybe they want like little anecdotes included, but they don't want new, perspectives. They don't want new stories, I find. So it's why these channels do it the way they do it, and it's sensationalized, and the research is completely shoddy, and they don't care about that. It's all about things like animation and all this sensationalist storytelling and things like that. And it's what kills good history, because good history doesn't make money like that does. So that's why people do that. I mean, there'd be a lot of Mountie stuff. Sorry, I'm just reading comments. I got confused for a second there. Yeah, so this is, again, not asked, but something interesting is RCAM, the RCAMP, right? It's a paramilitary organization that basically, functions in a lot of ways as a national police force. When I started OTD, I wasn't sure if to include them in things. I decided against it, and I've stuck to that since, and I'm not going to change that. I get that they have a military role, particularly very early on with the Northwest Mounted Police and things like that. And if that comes up, I do include it. I mean, I haven't done the daily stuff and since the summer, which that's coming back in 2024. There's another update I forgot. Look forward to OTD posts coming back, the literal every, on this day posts coming back in 2024 at some point. I'm not sure yet when, some January for sure. But just on, not on Twitter, because I'm not active on there anymore. Other than for messaging, but everywhere else it'll be back. So yes, so I decided not to include them for all kinds of reasons, and how that organization developed and what it does now, and how it changed after the First World War, becoming more of a police force than really a paramilitary role that it had for a short period. So I just decided against it. So it's something nobody asked, but it's what I do. I don't do it. Yeah, the guides, I've always been impressed with them and how they've done things like Vimy, Beaumont and Mel, and all of that. It's a great program where they hire younger people to be guides at these locations. They do both, right, with Vimy, and Beaumont and Mel, which are national sites now and run by the Canadian government. Talked about them before. It's fantastic what they are able to let them do, and the idea is having younger Canadians, for the majority of those who fought at these places were younger. So that's the thinking, right? Is you have these young people who are at these places where many young Canadians fought and died, and telling these stories and taking people at Vimy, like taking them into the tunnels, like in the Grange Tunnel, and, Beaumont ML taking you into the trenches and up the path to the danger tree. And it's just, and then all around and everything. It's fantastic. And they know their stuff. They literally like make them study and do tests and stuff like that. So it's not just like, oh, we hire students because it's cheaper, which a lot of places do, but it's really good. I really like it. It's one of the things we've done really, really well. And the US could do something similar and it would be really, really good. I mean, particularly like, again, this is a tangent, but the amount of Civil War sites there are, the students that can do that, there's so many, right? And you could cover those in such a good way and an engaging way, and just doesn't seem to happen. So that's unfortunate. Excellent question. So about going Canadian war diaries or field reports from World War II. Excellent question. So that is best to do really only through Library and Archives Canada. Some of it's digitized and accessible right this moment. So you go to there. Well, actually, hold on. You know what? Give me a second here. I'll show you. No, I don't want to take your survey. I'm just trying to think of one that is available online. So you can just put it in the unit is what I usually do, depending on what I'm looking for. And then if you just want online, you can do yes, and it'll pull up what's available. Like this is First World War here of the RCR, because I did a lot of research for them. So this is why this is just keyed up. Yeah, so you can go through it, whatever they have. They don't have everything. Not all of them are digitized, unfortunately. So that said, you would just go and do the search through the collection search, and then put it in whatever you're looking for, and then you'd have to like physically go or hire someone to do it for you. I can do that work if people are interested, but that's the way to do it, is just do it through the website. It's good. Some of it's good. Some of it's not fully digitized, so it's not up and available. Like Project 44 has taken the war diaries for Northwest Europe, Italy, Hong Kong, and a few other non-Canadian units, and has put them into their map. It's just the day by day, though. They don't have the appendices, unfortunately, so you don't get things like other ranks returns of the coming in and out of the unit, and you don't get the patrol reports and the nominal rolls. Again, every war diary is different, and there's no standardization here. But sometimes you get lucky and you get a whole wealth of information. But that's not digitized, so they don't include that there. Just because of scale, it would have been too much. So some of that has been fully done and is on Library and Archives Canada, depending on what you're after. But if you want one that isn't, you can go there or hire someone to do it for you. Hiring someone to do it for you is cheaper and faster than getting them to do it for you. Jump into the show screen. I put up a comment, I think. Yeah, I mean, they have a bunch of films. They just don't let anybody access them. It doesn't really, they should be public domain, but they don't digitize them. They don't let you access them. And then they copyright claim you. I've heard that from all kinds of people. So I don't touch it. That's a good question. So I try to cover as much as I can. I don't think you came in at the beginning, so I told you at the beginning that 2024 is going to have a strong focus on Normandy due to the 80th anniversary and that massive project I've taken on, where I'm looking at every major Canadian engagement and going to Normandy and covering the sites and doing research and all that good stuff. But it's just me, though, right? So OTD is literally just me. You're looking at the operation here. This is it. Just me. I'm alone. I'm trying to do as much as I can. So only 24 hours in a day, and I have other jobs to keep paying the bills, because OTD does not, unfortunately, pay the bills. So I can only do so much. But my main interests, obviously, are the world wars. I think that comes across in the content I make, particularly lately, it's just where my focus has been. I haven't done as much World War I as I'd like, because that's kind of what I focused on in my academic career, was the world wars and how they impact, first it impacted the second, and people's mindsets and why Canada fought the way it did. But yeah, I've done some stuff on Canadians fighting in the Union Army, those who won the Medal of Honor, some of them. There's some live streams of various different time periods. You can go through that playlist and just call live streams. It's all kinds of different stuff. Everything shocking from hockey to stuff happening in Manitoba to 1812, Battle of Lake Erie, stuff about rebellions. I went to a battlefield from one of the rebellions called the Battle of the Windmill. It was literally a windmill. And no, it's not Animal Farm, because it's not too far from where I live on the St. Lawrence River. So like, it cover as much as I can, depending on the time and where I can go and resources. So I try to cover as much as possible, which I know is difficult. Those who cover everything cover nothing. But obviously the world wars are my focus. But I try to do the live streams. That's why I like doing them, because I can bring in experts in these topics, and we can sit down, metaphorically, for an hour and a half, and get into some nitty gritty about topics that I don't do from my previous academic work or what I do for public history projects, right? So that's the whole thinking. But primarily for myself, it's 20th century, early 20th, first half of the 20th century, and First World War, Second World War, Korea, are what I really, really focus on. Yes, he's always good at giving me more to do. Really, really more to do. Yes, and yes, Farley Mowat did write some of the Hasty Peas war diaries, and you can tell, if you know what you're looking for, you can tell when he takes over. I mean, obviously you can see who signs it, but you like, I was doing this with Project 44, right? I did the Hasty Pea digitizations that they had. So I was literally going through it, and because I wasn't really reading it, but I do so much archival work, right? Sometimes you just zone out, but sometimes you read super fast. And I'm like, the tone has changed. It became super literary. And I'm like, this is Mowat. And I looked, and it was his initials. So it's really, really cool. Yeah, really, really cool. Yes, you are a problem child, Scott. Scott, problem child, Grimwood. Canadians in the Pacific War. Well, that's my dissertation, is part of that. Canadians in Hong Kong. There's playlists you want to check out. That's from some of the earlier stuff. And when I started the channel, because that's what I was still working my dissertation at the time. So I've talked about that. I've talked about Canada and the Pacific on other places, not so much here. I've been wanting to do a video on HCMS Uganda, the ship that voted itself out of the war, Canada's naval mutiny. That's what I would like to title the video, because it wasn't technically a mutiny. They literally voted themselves out because fighting in the Pacific was only volunteers. So they voted, and the majority voted no, so they left. They supported, they're part of the British Pacific Squadron, supported operations against Okinawa. And then after that, they left. And by the time actually they made it home to Vancouver, the war was over anyway. And they got quite the frosty reception at Pearl Harbor for, I think, obvious reasons. So there's that. You've got some special forces in China, Chinese Canadians know the language. Some were born there, some raised in Canada, have immigrant parents, so they knew the language and they knew the culture, so they were parachuted in behind the lines. And then things like Norma was talking about with the RCAF and its contributions to the Pacific War. Yes, there is some there, but I haven't really done an in-depth dive on my channel. Talked about it other places. No RCMP nor Finn flying Nazis in Canada. Or did you fight that one or escaped and made it to the US border and then ends up getting killed anyway? There's one I should do a video on, because I live not far from where he literally jumps off of a train. I forget his name. He was a pilot captured in the Battle of Britain. And then he's brought over here as a POW and then makes his way to the US, which is neutral at the time, and crazy story. And he just ends up getting killed anyway. That'd be a real cool one to do, because he jumps from the train outside Smith Falls, which is like half an hour from here, and then books his way to the border at St. Lawrence. So it's quite the story. Yeah, so it's similar with the JBC Juno Beach Center. They hire students too, but it's the Juno Beach Center is on its own. It's, you know, Beaumont and Mel and Vimy are the government. Juno Beach is on its own, but it's the same idea. Students, younger people, and they lead you through the bunkers and all that stuff, and the command posts and all that stuff that's on the beach there. And one area I'm definitely checking out when I go. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's one of them online. Yeah, Calgary Highlanders. Hey, Dave, Utah Dave, how's it going, man? Haven't seen you on the channel in a while. I guess I haven't streamed in a while, especially fitting your mountain time zone. Mountain, you guys are mountain. Yes, you'd have to be. Loving our mountain time zone friends. That's a really good question, and obviously something I think about. That's a really good question. 2 years time. That's something I haven't been asked before. It's always, you know, what do you want for the next year? I don't like doing this, but it keeps coming up. I hope we're still going. And by we're, I mean all of us, the community, and me still being able to do this. That's my hope for, I guess, 2025. At the end of 2025, this is a lot stronger, more than 8,000 subscribers. And, you know, hopefully Patreon's doing a lot better and I'm producing more content and better content. That's the whole idea behind the Canada Normandy project, is to do a really good job on a really solid topic that's going to get people's interest and hopefully bring in the numbers. That's the idea. So hopefully, you know, at the end of 2025, OTD has gotten stronger. It's something I can, you know, do more regularly on and better quality content. Like hopefully weekly videos would be awesome. Like good quality videos every week, right? I have enough time to, you know, breathe and get stuff moving in a hopper instead of having to do everything frantically like I do now. Everything's the seat of my pants. When I get a moment, I can jump on a live stream, or I have to plan a live stream like 2 weeks in advance, like I had to do for this, like just to fit timelines and all that stuff. So like that's for me personally. You know, it's be selfish, but I'd like it to be in a better setup position, right? With more patrons would be fantastic. YouTube channel members would be great, just because it helps going, right? Like it's hard to get good funding for this the way I'm doing it, and that's what I'd love to see happen. I'd love to be able to do as well more live streams. I talked about that. I'd love to do more of those, bringing in lots of different ones, covering all these topics we're talking about tonight and all the different stuff all regularly. I'd love that to be more than just every once in a while when I can get someone to come and have the time myself and not trying to cover everything else that I have going on. Like that would be, that's a goal of mine, is to get that back to where it was. Like the live streams used to be more frequent and crucial part of what I was doing, and it's just fallen aside because of time. So that's one thing I'd love to do. And then also what I'd love to do is do like the Canada Normandy project, but for other stuff, right? Particularly with coming up with the 80th anniversary of 1945, right? There's things I'd love to do. I'd love to do like a solid project on the fighting in the Rhineland, because I've been there. I've led tours through there, the liberation of the Netherlands. Like I'd love to do something like that I'm doing for Normandy. I don't know if that's going to be possible. I don't know if OTD will be strong enough to do that. If I haven't, you know, had to take on a full-time job somewhere else. So hopefully that's not what happens. I'm working towards that not happening and doing other stuff. But that's a big thing I'd love to do, is have these big projects planned out and done and covered well, particularly the Netherlands. I love going there, and the people I met, and they were great. So I know I could do this, but it's just an issue of time and money, as everything always is. But that was something I'd love to cover more. I mean, I'd love to do the shells, and hopefully Norma's still watching. I mean, I'd love to do the shells in that depth as well. I don't know if I'm going to have the time to do that so soon after the Normandy project. But that's what I'd love to see and have this doing, is I can do solid videos on like maybe one-offs, like we've been talking about Civil War, or Scott's still pushing for the Cuban Missile Crisis on RCN, like do a good job of that, and then get back to the projects, I could call them. Like that's what I'd love to do, and then have live streams more frequently instead of just when I can get them, and make it like a regular scheduled thing, and then make AMAs or just these online hangouts regular. Like that's what I'd love to see, because this is the future of history. I've said this before. This is how history is getting done. This is how it's getting communicated. People interacting with each other in real time, different interests, different backgrounds, different locations. This is how it's going to be done. And I want to be part of it. I don't want to be on the sideline. So I guess that's the best way to put it. And hopefully that's a good answer, because that's what the Canada Normandy project is hopefully going to do, is put OTD on good footing. That's the idea. I need to circle back around and comment on the Monty short OTD did. Which one? You have to remind me. But fire away. You just have to remind me which one. I make a lot of shorts. Yes, they are called operations reports. They are not called war diaries. Yeah, there you go, Sean. Yeah, Fort Wellington Windmill. It's a cool little spot, actually, even just to go and hang out, because it's so quiet. I loved it. I was there forever. I mean, it's literally we're converted into a lighthouse. It's now decommissioned as a historical site. I was there in the off season. It was just cool to hang out there. It's just a nice little area, and to think like this battle that involves Canadian militia working with the U.S. Navy and the Royal Navy against Canadian American rebels, quote unquote, Republicans, small r. It's wild, and I covered it as best I could on the ground when I didn't have good kit, but that's getting better as well. Field trip to Hong Kong. I think I've talked about this in the past. I don't think I'm very welcome there. They passed the law, right? Anything disparaging the Chinese Communist Party, if you've said anything at any point disparaging them, which I have, in a publicly accessible way, my dissertation, and visas are a little different in Hong Kong, they'll throw you in jail in the mainland, and I'd really rather not go to a Chinese prison. Personally, I don't want to go to any prison for that matter. So I would love to do that, but I just don't think it's in the cards for me anytime soon. I was going to go, and then the protests broke out because of the laws and everything, that one particular, and it just COVID hit, and I don't think I'm ever going to get to see it myself. Coming back around to technical stuff, nothing, no, because I don't know it. I wish I knew better. I wish I understood it better. It doesn't work for me. I can't wrap my head around the technical aspects, and people like yourself know better than I, so I don't touch it. The only thing I really know is Clinton, Ontario, and the training that was done there in the war, and the work done there related to radar. That could be something in the future, but talking about sites and education and things like that. But the technical stuff, I'm trying to understand. I don't know if anyone's really heard of it, but it's called Shorin. I don't even know if I'm saying it correctly. Short range navigation. It's a combination of short range navigation that was used to get bombers to somewhat of a correct location. They used it to map Canada. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that technically. So anything else, it's going to blow me out of the water, and the video will be terrible. Just can't do it, unfortunately. But if you know stuff, please tell me. What is the biggest RCMP gunfight? What do you mean? Like battle? Like, because the Northwest Mounted Police are involved in the Northwest Resistance. They fight in some of the battles there, if that's what you mean. They do other things. Ipperwash was a more current one that comes to mind. It's not a gun battle, but they weren't involved in Ipperwash. Sorry, never mind. That was Ontario Police, OPP. Never mind. But if that's what you mean, yeah, they were involved in some battles when they were first established, way back when. Yes, that's the Luftwaffe pilot who escaped and ran. Sorry, I'm just really behind in the comments here. Yeah, I think that would be really cool, just because it's nearby and it's a crazy story. Yeah, Mountain Time. I knew it. Okay. Canadian, French Canadians. Did they lean Vichy or resistance or Gaullist? I guess. Vichy, unfortunately. Um, so again, this is my understanding. I have French Canadian ancestry, French Canadian relatives. Unfortunately, all of those who spoke French are now passed, and or lived in Quebec are all gone. But French Canadians live elsewhere as well, as I always say. So a lot of the things that Vichy did, particularly in terms of religion, seeing with what was happening in the French Third Republic, kind of going to get beat up for that one. Good. Third or fourth? Third. Yes. With the collapse in 40. A lot of people in France were not a fan of that, right? The Catholic Church's role diminished and the role of the family diminished and all this sort of stuff. And Quebec at the time very much was still based around the Catholic Church and the family unit because of, its agrarian base that has largely changed today. It doesn't really have the same role it does now, and the majority of the population is not rural anymore. French is still strong, the rest not so much. So a lot of people supported Vichy. Canada had a weird, not full-out diplomatic relations with Vichy like the Americans did, but very well supported amongst certain parts of French Canadian population supported Vichy because of the whole thing, right, with how they were governing, which is basically just fascism based around family religion and those things. In French society, a lot of that was present in Quebec society. I'm not saying they were fascists, but the role of the church and what they claimed in Vichy was running things. And when it turns out it was just fascist under Pétain, that was really well liked by a lot of people in Quebec, especially because of just the way French Canadian society in that part of the country, which is not all of French Canadians, so to speak, was structured. So there's a book on it. I have a book on it. I used it a little bit for my dissertation to kind of understand Canadian popular perception of the war, really the early war, because to me they're very different. Things like pre-Dieppe and post-Dieppe are very different in how things are viewed, in my opinion. So a lot of it leans Vichy. Some of it was supportive of the Gaullists in a way. There was a bit of a row over St. Pierre and Miquelon, which are two still French islands off the coast of Newfoundland. I mean, obviously Newfoundland is not part of Canada at the time. De facto was for all kinds of reasons. But there was a big row over that and the Gaullists taking it over and the Canadian government being pissed off that they did that. And it's a crazy episode that maybe I could cover one day, but it's fascinating stuff. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of work being done on Hill 70, but Fredley especially, because of how Hill 70 is remembered and the association that did the memorial and all of that, which is not technically on Hill 70 because Hill 70 is now prison. I think I've talked about this before. It's crazy. It's business park / prison. It's a prison. So it's at the start line. But anyway, so there was lots of work done by that organization and all that stuff. So really, really cool. Yes, David, that is correct. It is the best way. I get the larger cut. It's a good platform. I'm able to share, long form, which I haven't done in a while, unfortunately, but like videos I can share there easily for everybody, and I can show them quote unquote uncensored, right? There's a few on there that would just never pass YouTube. Not even about monetization, just generally they would get hidden behind all these walls. No one would ever see them because of the nature of military history. I'm able to do that on Patreon for people, right? If something's going to get tagged for censorship reasons, Patreon doesn't do that. I can share more. They've made some changes. They've added some stuff. I think they've made it a little bit easier to use on my end, a little bit easier to use on the user experience as I've poked around myself. But yeah, Patreon is the best way. It's better than the YouTube channel memberships because YouTube takes a bigger chunk. So if you do want to support the channel, Patreon is a great way to do it. And we can have conversations over there and we can get in more in depth about things that I don't necessarily want to share publicly right away or even at all. It's a great platform, I think, for both sides. And I really like using it. Yes, I know he is. Bread. Oh, thank you. People call me Bread all the time. Yeah. Yes, he is leading a tour. I don't know any details about it, but October, that'd be a great time to go because that would match the conditions. It'll be wet. But yeah, it's tempting. And going to the Netherlands is just great. I mean, obviously, some of it's Belgium, but I just love going to the Netherlands. Great country. Yes, he's hard to knock. Oh yeah, I know the one you're talking about now. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not that. No, I don't think he was great. I think he was upper average, um, depending on the day. I don't think he was terrible. I think I talked about his leadership in a short video from the live stream about John English's book, Canadians on the Canadians in Normandy. His leadership style, particularly post facto, I'm not a fan of. I don't like when higher ups, no matter the organization or what's being done, blame underlings. That's a bad word, subordinates for when things go bad. I think um, leaders should take ultimate responsibility for particularly failures. But that's just me. And Monty would pass the buck, and so would Simmons, and they're from the same school of thought on that one. I don't like it. Not a fan. But yeah, I think he plays that role. I mean, he does lead well at LMA, second LMA. I'm not going to deny that. His sort of that Monty way of war is on display at LMA. Kind of moves away from that later on, even though he kept harping that, and those have still continued to harp about the Monty way of war and how it was the best way, even though Monty himself didn't do it half the time. Alamein was that example, and it worked extremely well. So he was a built-in hero to begin with. And then particularly when they moved, into Sicily and then into the mainland of Italy, it makes for a good hero. And yes, and things like the relationship between him and Patton were obviously overblown because of the movie and things like that. So they didn't get along in a lot of the ways, but it wasn't like, what is it said in the movie? George C. Scott says something about having to treat him like a child or a baby or something. Someone will have to remind me, like take care of him or something like that. It wasn't like that. There was a big fight over roads, but it wasn't to that extent that it was going to stop the campaign from working properly. Like that didn't happen. Yeah, Shorin. I've never heard anyone say it out loud. I've just recently discovered it because I'm doing some stuff on mapping with the RCAAF. Any paper. I found one technical paper that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, but yeah. The RCMP beat Texas Rangers, and why not? In hockey? Baseball? I don't know. I don't know about the Texas Rangers. They're a state. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Probably, maybe both. I don't know. I'm not a cop. Yeah. Yeah, no idea. Yeah, no clue. Yeah. 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 I mean, kind of. Yes. I mean, even though not. Yes, obviously not though, because that's the majority of poor people have never been able to keep women not working. I mean, that's a huge misnomer about so many things, but particularly at war. But I know exactly what you're talking about, Norma. And yeah, Quebec has swung the other way, like since the so-called quiet revolution of the 1960s, where they basically diminished the role of the church and all of that, and the more traditional societies of farming and how that was done in Quebec for hundreds of years. They've really gone the other way. It's fascinating. Canadian Rangers would freeze to death on the prairie. So would everybody. So cold. Just remembering, how much of any of the U.S. Brit World War II winning innovation was Canadian or should have come with Canadian recognition? Oh, that's good. That's a really good question. Not really a lot, unfortunately. Big one is the armored personnel carrier, turning non-used tanks that were just used for training into APCs. I mean, it starts with self-propelled artillery in Normandy, and then they use the Ram tanks to turn them into APCs. I have some video of those on my channel, which are fascinating to see. Unfortunately, it threw its transmission, so I don't think it's going to be driving anytime soon at the Canadian War Museum. But it was great to see driving, and I have footage of it, so you can watch anytime. That's one. I mean, it's not gigantic, but like things like the innovations are far more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Work together, like British, American, Canadians working together. Like there's a lot of that. Canada's involved in the Manhattan Project with scientists, but also things like providing plutonium or uranium for the Manhattan Project and knowledge and things like radar. Again, I don't know. Trent would know more than me. But I know Canadians are working on that in places. There's innovations that are like would seemingly minor with production, a lot of production, streamlined in certain ways. And like Elsie McGill, who's called the queen of the hurricanes for our British friends, like things like that, like small things, quote unquote, production and efficiency and getting more fighter planes built faster, things like that. Some of those are Canadian, but to say like there's a Canadian innovation that's like being taken from Canada, you can't. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that really makes a difference. I mean, canoes are used by other people. That was invented in Canada by the Indigenous people. So does that count? I don't know. But things like that. Nothing like major, like because things like detection equipment that's used on the convoys is comes from the British. A lot of the American stuff. There's some Canadians inventing stuff, but are done with American money, like walkie-talkies and things like that. But nothing major that comes to mind. But if I'm wrong, please let me know. Yeah, it's mostly production, as Scott's saying here. Canadians built British design. Yeah, Lancaster, Hurricanes, Lysander, guns, 25-pounders, small arms, lots of small arms. I mean, it's not the same type of production, but I always think what is interesting, and Tim Cook highlights this in his book, is that Canada outproduces the Axis in terms of total production all on its own. Right? Canada's producing more small arms, more ammunition, more field artillery, vehicles especially. Canada's outproducing, Italy, Germany, and Japan. Doesn't count the Romanians and the Bulgarians. I don't think they have much production. If I'm wrong, Grant will come after me, but it outproduces all three combined on its own. And that doesn't count what the Soviets are doing, the British and the Americans. So Canada's involved in that way. We're cranking stuff out like nobody's business. And, you've got the Americans right next door doing the same thing around Detroit and other places in Chicago, and Canadian goods are moving through American ports and American goods are moving through Halifax. And it's a lot more working together, right? And that's another underappreciated thing about the Second World War is how these governments that were all different, even with Canada within the Empire and the Commonwealth, didn't always get along with what Britain's doing or wanting to do. And they were able to come together and work together rather easily, I would say. I mean, there's hiccups and stupid fights, and there always is. But things like Canada and the United States coming together to share economic resources, even before Pearl Harbor, working together in defense for North America before Pearl Harbor is just, it's crazy that they were able to pull this off. So that's an underappreciated area, in my opinion. Yeah, the Churchill AVRE, part of the funnies, but yeah, same sort of thing. Ideal for virtual games. Texas Rangers, RCMP. Yeah, there it is. Mattress thingies. Yeah, that's a British Canadian thing, technically. Even though it's all British equipment. Another one, it's great. I just love it because it's so funny. And we only have one left, and it's in Ottawa, and Pat got a picture of it with me. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the corduroy road thinking. Yeah, I mean, like the Canadian military pattern trucks. It's why don't we call it an innovation? I mean, it's just standardized. versus zombies. Yeah, things like that, and then yeah, anti-mortar radar. Um, yeah, well, that Flower class corvettes are British, technically. Yeah, well, they beat everybody in horse carts. It's not a category you want to win in a modern war. Um, yeah, like the CMPs, right? Like they're used throughout the Allied war effort. They just call that innovation. I don't know. It's just standardized, but they role is undeniable, right? Like in North Africa, especially, like they play a huge role there. Soviets use them, which I think is so funny. They would just make them all the same, right? So you'd have English and Cyrillic on them, and it's funny to see. And then some were shipped to nationalist China, and the War Museum's got one that's tagged in all kinds of ways with all this stuff on it. It's fascinating and how this all came together. I mean, obviously it fell apart afterwards, but during the war, working together. So there's two airworthy ones in Canada. Sorry, in the world. One in Canada and one in the UK. Yeah. Oh, thanks for coming out, Chris. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I was thinking of the wrong thing. Oh, that's really cool. That's railway. I should have, or airway connected. I should have thought of that. Anyway, yeah, that's really cool. I mean, Canadians know about fighting through forests and putting roads to them. It's kind of a Canadian thing. But yeah, no, it's an area that's fascinating. So we're definitely gonna have to get you on at some point in the new year to talk about this stuff because it's an area I've been digging into myself, and it just comes up when looking at Canada's war. But things like Southeast Asia and China and the naval role, and even what didn't happen, right, with Tiger Force and the Canadian Pacific Force and how it was going to fight in the terrain it had never fought in. Luckily, they didn't have to. But yeah, other than that, it's an undertouched area, unfortunately. One I was pushing for, still push for, is Canada's view as a Pacific nation. Obviously, we view the Atlantic as more Canadian, even though we are on the Pacific too. We don't look west. We still look south and east. Maybe we should be looking a little more west. Beer money. Oh, thank you so much for the super chat. That is much appreciated. I don't drink much anymore, but that'll help pay for Normandy. I gotta get a rental car still. So, because yeah, again, talking about that with earlier in the show for next year, because there's lots of cool places that I've already tagged in like I have a running Google Maps location, and I'm like even finding places that I've forgotten about or memorials that I'd never heard of. Like I found a Norwegian memorial in the middle of the Canadian sector. Like it's fascinating to see this stuff. Yeah, you're right, Ivan, about the corvettes. They're a whaler and adapted into a warship, not meant to be ocean-going vessels. And UK first. So you have there the Flower class, right? So like there's an HMS Pansy at some point. Canadians name them after cities mostly. So like then the cities would get clubs together to support, ship. Had a lot to do with politics and things of the nature. Yeah, but it's a fascinating little chunk of Canada's war, and the conditions on those corvettes were just awful crossing the North Atlantic. I mean, they sound awful to, go across even Lake Erie, but them doing it across the Atlantic multiple times and then using these to support the landings and then going back to convoys and going after, it was British, not Canadian. So, because they're Flower class, they have enough flowers. But yeah, and then going after U-boats and these things, that's a glorified whaler, and it's wild. And the stories of these guys and the utter bravery and I don't know what other word to use, steeledness of doing that is just, it's talked about a lot, and I'm glad it is. It's just it gets lost a lot of it in the shuffle, particularly when it comes to the Battle of the Atlantic, because I think that battle is misunderstood a lot, and it ruffles a lot of feathers when people look at it. I mean, Woody was doing those myth shows, right? And he had Alan Allport on, talking about the convoys and how the threat of the U-boat as cutting off Britain was much exaggerated, and it still is. It never was as bad as it was thought to be. I mean, there's a lot to be said for when leaders think something is bad and then make decisions off of that. That is separate to me. You study that from that angle. But to say that, the Battle of the Atlantic was almost going to be lost at one point it's just not true, right? Like, there's a perfect example of this, and it's unfortunately the Royal Canadian Navy not at its finest. I mean, they're not given the best equipment to do what they're told to do, but they're basically pulled back from convoy duty completely because they can't do it properly and they can't keep up. Whereas the Royal Navy and the US Navy are able to fill that hole and things continue unabated. So, and then they come back. They come back to doing the convoys, and it took some learning curve, and Tim Cook covers that. I think, I don't know. Sorry, I forget who asked that earlier about Tim Cook's books, but he covers that in there. And obviously Marc Milner has talked about this as covering his naval stuff. And then Roger Sardi, who's also done the naval stuff, looks at this, and it's just not talked about in that way because it ruffles a lot of feathers. I don't know why we want things to be bad. I don't know. Oh, thanks, David. And that just reminds me of a question I wanted to ask you guys, for those who are still watching. Thank you so much. That is so greatly appreciated, and happy holidays to you too, David, down in Utah. So this is a question I have. So I got a comment today on a short that's kind of been blown up for me about some footage from, I believe it's from Utah Beach, from Juno Beach, which I think it's Brits and Canadians landing later. About, I've been saying, like, we don't necessarily know who these guys are, unlike the famous North Shore Regiment footage, blah, blah, blah. For some reason, the algorithm has picked it up last couple of days, and it's gone skyrocketing. Someone left a comment saying, paraphrasing here, that basically, other than Omaha and Utah, were the other beaches easy, or they had heard that the other beaches were easy. This might be generalizing, but why do Americans think they had the hardest time on D-Day? Because I know we have Americans watching. And why is that a point of almost pride? That I don't understand and would love some insight into. Wouldn't you want things to go well for your people at all times? I mean, they're wrong, right? Just in almost every objective way of looking at this stuff, right? Utah, I said to them, I didn't say any of the beaches were easy. To say any opposed amphibious landing is difficult. I mean, Gallipoli, all this stuff, very difficult. So I said, and none of them were easy, but if you're going to look at it in this way, wouldn't Utah be the easiest one? And that's a good thing in my books. They landed in the, wrong spot, and it worked out. So why are people, they don't say it, but they're seemingly proud that Omaha was so bad. One guy also said, like, the Americans were being punished and having to take Utah and Omaha because they came into the war late. And I go, that's what? Like, that's not what happened. So I'm just wondering if you guys, anybody can give some insight on that. I don't understand it. It's almost like a point of pride that it was tough and it was difficult and a lot of Americans died. I don't get it. And then to say that Utah was difficult. I mean, in any way, looking at it, Utah went extremely well. I mean, inland, it was more difficult. But the beach itself went off fairly easy, relatively speaking. There's still casualties, and far too many. I mean, one is too many, but that's war. But anyway, I don't get it. Is it just, is it like the Alamo that's run through American, thought of war and defeat? Like, we're always these rugged guys on the frontier fighting. Like, is that what it is? I mean, I would say it's American exceptionalism. That's my opinion. as someone who's done American studies, which is at the heart of looking, is what at heart of American studies is looking at American exceptionalism and how I understand it. I have an MA in it, so maybe I understand it a little bit. Is America is this exceptional place at all points and all times. Like I've said this to people, America is the best at everything and the worst at everything at the same time. And people are proud of that. You know, we're always, everything's the worst here or it's the greatest here. And I'm just like, what? Why would you want your stuff to be bad? You know, I don't really get it. But yeah, I think we talked about defeat a lot on this channel and did a whole live stream about it. So maybe, yeah, glorified defeat. You know, they struggled at Omaha, so therefore they're like better at the military thing. I don't know. This is just stuff I'm thinking about, but yeah, I know I don't have to. I've seen it. Yeah, I mean, against all odds. Is it like so seemingly like we like, you know, it's the Rambo thing, guns a-blazing? Like I don't know. I don't know. I would love to hear thoughts on this. Left field question. Okay. I know there are places on land where battles are honored by soldiers when they cross those paths. Are there places where sea battles occurred? Soldiers honor when they pass. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I only really know the Canadian context. I know crossing the equator is a big thing. That's not what you asked, but it's a thing that they still do. They do, like, what is it, King Neptune's court? I don't know if they still do it in that way. I don't really understand what they do, but they do. There's funny photos of it if you look that up. With navies, like they're all dressed up funny and things like that. Like crossing the equator is a big deal, but I don't think like anywhere in like an ocean is that way. But like places are like have that reverence, like Pearl Harbor and things like that for other people, right? Like I think for obvious reasons now, but when Japanese vessels go to Pearl Harbor, pretty respectful of them when they come there, right? For obvious reasons. I mean, US and Japan are very close allies now for obvious reasons why they do that. But you know what I mean? Like it's things like that. I mean, it's just generally speaking, but I don't know. That's not something I know much of, but nothing I've ever heard of. Like things like memorials and monuments and stuff, but that's land. But other than that, no, I don't know. But that's a really good question, actually. If somebody knows, I'd love to hear. That's a good point, Pat, as well. Protestantism and the battle against nature. Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. Yeah, that's that whole frontier thesis, right? That is sort of correct, but not really. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like that's done at the Arizona, right? Yeah. But like that's, you know what I mean? That's not like in the ocean, if that's what you meant. But again, there could be naval traditions of other countries. I don't know. Like the site where Prince of Wales and Repulse went down. Does the Royal Navy do that? I don't know. I mean, Omaha and its losses were a shock. I mean, Tarawa was a shock and was well before that. I don't know if you're joking or not. I think you're joking, Bruce. But yeah, well, they wouldn't have known the full extent of the losses anyway. But I understand what you're saying. If you're not joking, I'm not sure. Anyway, yeah, it's just something I see because of that short, right? It's people think it's Americans. Coming back to this, but people think it's automatically Americans, or that because American footage, which isn't true, by the way, most American footage was lost from D-Day. That's not true. That's just Robert Capa's footage. Photos were mostly destroyed at some point or another. Not really sure how that whole thing went. Someone blames, the young gentleman in the office and blah, blah, blah. So therefore, all American footage is lost. Therefore, all footage is lost. Even though there's tons of Canadian footage, and tons of British footage, tons of film and photos. And I don't know, it just seems like it's the same thing again. I get it, and it's a population thing. I get it. 300 plus million Americans versus the rest of us in the English-speaking world. Right? We're dwarfed a lot. I get it. But it's just some weird things that I see, and I studied American academically, and I still don't get. But yeah, there's that Manifest Destiny thing, the Frontier thing, then you have Alamo, and remember the Maine, and all this stuff. And Americans are tough, and we can do it. And no one else can, and blah blah blah. Anyway, any more questions? If I missed, please fire away. I'm gonna have to jump off shortly, but I've enjoyed this. Thank you for. Oh yeah, okay. Sorry, I've enjoyed hanging out with everybody. But yeah, you was focused on Pacific War Island hobby. Yes, true. Well, that's why Terra was such a shock, right? It was one of the, first ones that were published, photos especially of dead Marines all over the front pages. So yeah. Well, I certainly do. Yes, they did, but I meant casualty lists, things like that. Right? There'd be Omaha was hard. You can hear that on the radio, but what does that mean? You know what I mean? That's different. They can't say that right away. They can't give casualty lists. They don't want to. But people can parcel it together when all the telegrams start coming. Right? And then, your son was in the 1st or 29th. Oh, so was mine. And the picture becomes a little clearer later on. Yeah, any more questions, fire away, other than give you guys a few more minutes. But yes, remember the Maine Spanish-American War, another crazy conflict with all kinds of stuff going on, and the Mexican-American War. This stuff is the fascinating things to me. Hey, Norma, thanks for coming and hanging out. I appreciate it. U.S. contributions were great and very much appreciated. I'll never forget. Yeah, I mean, we do that too. I mean, the Brits do. Everybody does it. Like it's wild that everybody does this, and then I only say that everybody else does it. It's funny. Canadians do it. Brits do it. Australians do it. We all do it. Anyway, yeah. So thanks everyone for hanging out. Which movie? The guys with cameras coming ashore. Yeah, actually, some of them are automatic cameras. Again, I have that on my channel. Just put in D-Day and OTD or whatever, and some of it will come up. And I got to add those books. Anyway, yeah, there's footage of them and all kinds of stuff on the beaches, especially later after the initial waves have come in, where there's still artillery going off. The Germans are still shelling the beaches and hitting them with mortars even. Like it's wild. Some of the stuff you can see. They're bringing POWs in and there's still shells going off. Anyway, yeah, so I'll add those Amazon links now that I'm finished. But other than that, have a good holiday season, everybody. So keep an eye out on here, but also the various social media channels that I'm active on. The OTD posts will be coming back at some point in January. I want to find a good event to start off of, and there's not really much at the beginning in Canada's overall, history and this stuff. I mean, obviously the Battle of the Bulge is going on, but Canadians are not fully involved in the fighting other than the paratroopers. So have a good holidays. Thanks everyone for the super chats and the support as patrons and channel members. It means the world to me to have that and to have this community. I'll say that again, but I want to end the year with that and my appreciation for everyone and everything you guys do for me means the world. So everyone have a good holidays, be safe, and we'll see everybody in the new year. I'll see everyone on the other side. Bye, everyone.